So Pat Gilroy, you're very welcome to the podcast, sir. How are you keeping today?
All good, all good.
Thank you for your time and coming in today, Pat. To say you've been the most requested guest is an understatement for this podcast. Many reasons. There's a lot of Dublin fans will listen to this, a lot of business owners, and then we've had the likes of Paul Flynn on the podcast of saying, and someone who you know quite well, who've worked with closely, Bart McEnroe's done 2 episodes with us as well. I think anyone who's listened to the Bart episodes have all said we need to get Pat on here to hear his kind of side of the work and the story. But before we get into Pat, the manager and the business leader, we talk a little bit about Pat, the footballer, and growing up playing with St Vincents, just to kind of give us an idea.
Look, it was a huge part of my life growing up, playing football and hurling. Played both up till I was 18. And luckily, you know, we won a few championships along the way. We won championships in school. You know, I suppose nearly every year we seemed to win something. So you kind of were going into adult games thinking, we'll win something. You know, Vincents were quite successful. At the time, you know, they won the last Dublin championship in 84 and they'd won a hurling in 93. So you're kind of coming into that thinking, we'll win whatever, but it didn't quite happen that way, you know. Played lots of years and we got relegated one year, and you know it was a difficult time to be involved with the Vincent senior football team. But we got there in 2007 and won the championship, and then went on to win the All Ireland, which I then decided that was a good time to call quits, you know.
That was your final year when you won the All Ireland, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. That was the last game I played.
What age bracket were you then? When
I was 37.
So it was a long journey.
It was. I played my first senior game at 19, so you know, it was 18 years, and as my wife would say, he wasn't going to give up until we won that one, because it was, you know, for a club of our history, really, it was too long. But like this, it's kind of in its sport. Things like that happen, you know. We were close a couple of times, but, you know, we just didn't kind of have the players probably to get it over the line until that batch of young guys came along with Dermot Connolly and Mossy and Ger Brennan and all them. I mean, they were an exceptional group. So,
yeah.
I mean, I was a good bit older than them, but I hung on because I could see that they definitely had something different to what I had played with all through. Even though we had really good teams in that period, but, you know, lost a couple of semi-finals, lost one final. But when they came, it completely transformed the place, because not only were they good players, their attitude was top class. Like they wanted the best, and they drove you forward. Like you know, they were setting standards as opposed to us, the older ones, setting standards. So I thoroughly enjoyed my playing career, even all those years where we didn't win. We had a great time, you know, and that's what it's about for me. You know, Gaelic football and hurling is your pastime, and if you're not enjoying it, then you shouldn't bother playing it. You know, it shouldn't be torture. It shouldn't be a grind. It should be something that you relish getting out of, if you like, real life to a degree, where you're, you know, under pressure of work or college or whatever. That should be your release. And for me, that was the case all the time. You know, I had small kids. By the time we won the All Ireland, I had 3 kids and another one on the way. And yet it was a good thing for me to be getting out of the house, doing the exercise, and then getting back home and do whatever I could.
To have something for yourself,
yeah,
space is massive.
It is. And you know, my wife did pick up a lot of the slack, to be fair to her, and she was great. She always encouraged me to be involved. But I suppose you then have to make decisions then yourself. So if you're getting that kind of latitude at home, you can't be going off to stag parties and this and that and the other. You know, because that's not fair. So, you know, you try as best you can to be balanced. But playing, you can't be playing. It really is fantastic.
And you played at college level as well, didn't you? You played with Trinity College.
I did, played with Trinity College, and we won a Division 1 league, got beaten in 2 Sigerson semi-finals. We had a very strong team in Trinity at the time. I mean, Joe Brolly would have been on it, and a good few other inter-county players. Like, I think nearly the whole 15 were playing with their county at the time, which was very unusual.
Yeah, strong, yeah.
But we gave it a good bash. We had a great coach, a young coach as he was at the time. He's in Vincents now, Brian Ladden. And he really made us so fit and wanted us to play a style of football that was very attractive. And I think that was it was like a drug. Everybody, you couldn't train enough. We were training, you know, 5 and 6 times a week, and you know, nobody complained about it. We were looking forward to it, even though it was really tough. We'd be out in St David's or out in Santry, and so it was difficult to get to. But then we did weekends away where we trained twice a day and stuff. Like, we were doing things that inter-county team started to do in the 2000s. This was 93.
Did that overlap with obviously playing with Dublin for yourself?
It did.
As well?
It did.
Yeah,
it did. Well, it put me in the shop window for Dublin because when I came out of minor, I was playing junior with Vincents, and then I was in college, and I got onto the first team in second year, and we won the league when I was in second year. And that kind of catapulted me onto the Dublin 21s, and then I got called into the senior squad then.
And what year did you come into the Dublin squad as a player?
92. At the end, when it was actually October or November 91, when after the 4 games with me, I came in that year and then made me championship debut in 92.
Did that feel like that was a new kind of cycle starting at that point with the Dublin team, or were you kind of coming into an established team?
It was a very established team. And there was a few of us, myself, Desi, Jim, for instance. The 3 of us actually came in around the same time. But we were the new kids on the block, very much so. And Jason was there, obviously, a couple of years after. But it was really the bones of the team that won the All Ireland in 95 were there in 90 and 89. It was the keepers, the Eamon Hearys, all those guys. That they were the core group, really.
And when you look back as a player winning it in 95, was that the most special for you, or did you find, we'll get to your management side and further in the conversation, but as a player, how did that feel being part of the team in the dressing room?
It's wonderful. I mean, it is wonderful when you do succeed. It's nearly more like a relief because we had come so close in 94 and 93 and 92 and even 91. So it was a relief more than anything else, and it was the same in 2011. But as a thing, the thing that sticks out most was winning the All Ireland with Vincents, because when you look out on the pitch, you know every single person there. Yeah, and when it's with your club, it's it's level altogether. I mean, the county stuff was brilliant too. But just the club is very, very special.
That's a good point. A lot of people say that as well about the club. There's just something extra special about it. I think that's it. It's guys you've known since 5 and 6 years old, playing the whole time together. It's particularly special.
Yeah, well, for me, I was taught in school by Dermot Connolly's father. Then I ended up playing with him to win an All Ireland. Then I ended up managing a team that he's on. And we went all, so it's so close. Yeah. Everything is parochial, really, and so it is extra special.
And as a player yourself, how would your teammates describe you? Were you a leader on the pitch, or would you have been one of the more quiet players?
I don't know. Probably with Vincent's in my latter years, I was definitely a leader, all right. But I think when I was younger playing with Dublin, I wasn't. I was quiet.
Were you conscious of there was bigger personalities maybe in the dressing room? Did that?
I didn't mind. I didn't mind speaking my mind, but I kind of recognised my place as well. When I came in, these guys were very experienced, and they kind of knew what they were talking about. So you would have sort of kept your mouth shut and just feel your way into it initially, I gave up playing with Dublin when I was 27. I was young enough, but I was starting up a new business and getting married. It just wasn't practical to keep going. And I had no regrets because we had the All Ireland. Things probably weren't going so great there at that time. Like that 95 to 2002 wasn't a great period. It was a bit difficult. So I would say with Dublin, I certainly was not a leader. Vincent's probably, my latter years in college, I was definitely a leader. But I think it emerges when you should be a leader and when you shouldn't. And I think if you ever try to impose yourself, then you'll probably not work out so well.
It's a fine line, yeah. So going back to, it was 2008 where you won the All Ireland with Vincents, So soon after that's when the call from Dublin management came. Is that correct? It was kind of straight after?
Yeah, it was. We won the All Ireland in March 2008, and then it was September. Got a call about would I be interested in it, and I went and had a chat, and then all of a sudden I had the job, and then I had to figure out, okay, how am I going to do this? But it was a relatively easy thing to agree to because Mickey Whelan was interested in being the coach, so that
he was your manager at Vincent.
He was, and he had no interest in being the manager again. He wanted, if he was doing it, to be a coach, and so he covered so many bases. He was a coach, a football coach, but he was a strength and conditioning coach. He was a mindset coach. So I had a lot of boxes ticked, and then I just needed to pick the selectors and then the other backroom team. But he had a lot of those people sort of handpicked from before when he did the Dublin minors.
Obviously, if you were playing in the division that year, you'd know a lot of the players because you're playing, so there's a big advantage there. But had you much actual management experience yourself? Because it's quite a big job to get.
I started managing teams when I was 22 or 23, underage, started in the nursery with 5-6 year olds. And to be honest, there's an awful lot of things that you learn there that you end up using when you're inter-county management, right? It sounds ridiculous, but it's not, because you need to be very clear and you need to be very understanding of small kids when they start. And you probably need the same, but it's just a different level of understanding when you're doing inter-county teams. So I suppose at that stage, I probably managed teams for about 12 or 13 years, but all within my own club, done a little bit with a college. I managed the senior team and played 1 year. I was player manager of Vincents 1 year. I think it was about 2003 or 4, which was difficult. It was difficult to play and manage. But we did well in the league and just got caught by UCD in the first round of the championship. I'd say we might have had a decent chance. So I'd had a lot of, I suppose, club experience managing, but very, very young kids. But I suppose my job from a very young age was being a managing director of business and understanding that. So I went into it thinking I had a lot of the boxes ticked, but more so because I had Mickey with me, because he had all the boxes ticked. And then I suppose 2009 happens, and you have to really look inside yourself and say, I had a few gaps here myself. And I remember coming home to my wife, and she said to me, I thought you said you knew what you were doing. And I remember going, well, I did think I knew what I was doing, but
this was after the defeat to Kerry,
yeah. And I just said, she said, well, you better find out the bits that you're missing, because you need to go and be successful here. It's that's what you set your mind to. So whatever it takes, just do it. So then I met Bart, and he pointed out so many things to me.
How did that? Did you seek Bart, or like after? Because I'd imagine you're fairly shell shocked, because you'd won Leinster, didn't you?
We won Leinster and played really well in the Leinster final. We were down a man, and we beat a very good Kildare team. I think Kieran McGeaney was managing them, and it was a real dogfight. And you kind of going into the quarter final, think we've more than a good chance. I think actually we were favourites to beat Kerry, because they were probably an ageing team. And then anyway, we lose, and I have to say it was like a death dealing with it, because it was so bad. We were beaten by so much that you're kind of looking at it going, really, am I the right person to be doing this, first of all? So you spend that first week blaming yourself, then you spend the next week blaming the players. And I remember writing a list the night of the game, actually, and saying 9 of those fellas, or 11 of them, I think I wrote on the list. I still have it. I said, they'll never play for Dublin again.
So you physically got pen and paper?
Yeah.
And listed out the names.
In pure temper. And I think 9 or 10 of them have 6 or 7 All Ireland medals now. So it just goes to show you that when you're angry, it's not the best time to act.
Yes.
Maybe write it down and just keep it aside. But but then I went looking for sports psychologists, and I spent a lot of time with different people. And I wanted one for the team, but I wanted one for myself. So Caroline Curran had come on board with the team side, which was going to be really helpful. But I felt I needed somebody myself, because I felt I needed to know more about that area. Yeah. So I'd interviewed a load of them, and I asked them a simple question: what went wrong against Kerry, or what did you think was the problem? And I got answers, and I went, maybe, but none of them resonated with me. And then I one of the selectors, somebody had contacted him and said he should contact this guy. So I got Bart's number and I rang him. And, I asked him the same question, and he said, are you okay if I say this? And I said, yeah, work away. And he said, well, I'm speaking to the problem. And I went, that's a different answer. But it was probably, I was ready, this was probably 10 weeks after we'd lost. And I was ready I was definitely humbled to the point of I needed, and I was hungry to learn. So he explained to me what it was, and I went, right, okay, I get it. That's real. What
did he point out? Was it the emotional hijack?
Emotional hijack. Yeah. And he explained how that works. And I went, I'll buy that was most likely what happened. So then I embarked really on that winter, spending ages up in his house, actually, trying to understand the whole framework that he was operating to at the time. And we were trying it out as I'd go out, we were playing some friendlies and we tried things out, and we started they were instant success in terms of just getting a better understanding. So you could see the players were understanding more what I was trying to communicate.
Did your actual tactics change, or was it just how you implemented them?
No, what I was trying to do in 2009 was what we did in 2010 and 11. Yeah. There was a lot more precision to it. But they understood it far better because I was getting it out of them as opposed to just telling them what to do, because some of them were getting it, but most weren't. So when we spent more time actually exploring it and understanding it and dissecting it, inevitably they came up with even better ideas than the ideas I had with Mickey and that in 2009. But it was definitely the engagement changed where we started to get real clarity. Now, we did do some extreme things to see could we do things like, let's see if we could stop a team scoring in a game. Now, forget about what we're going to do, but like we had a couple of games. I think we played Derry and we beat them, 7-3 or something. But that was a tactic to see, could we shut up shop if we needed to, if we had a lead. So we were trying to build all sorts of different game plans that we could flip between when needed. And ultimately, we were trying to get to a place where they could just do that themselves, that we wouldn't say, you have to do this at this time, but they'd notice something happening in the game and then they changed the style. But that was all done completely interactively with them.
How would that look on the pitch? Like, are you on the pitch or is it meetings? Are you asking questions?
Both. We would have done a lot off the pitch, but tend to be short, sharp sessions. And then we tried to practice the different patterns on the field. And then we tried them in friendlies first, and then tried them maybe in a National League game, and then obviously we would have tried different things in Leinster as well, where we mightn't have been shown our full hand of what we really wanted to play, and then that you'd hit the quarter final with something special. And we did that well enough. We got caught in 2010 by Meath trying something that didn't come off, and they got 5 goals. That if you took the 5 goals out, we probably outplayed them. But 5 goals are 5 goals, so. Again, we had to double down and get a bit tighter at the back, and that involved the 15 fellas being committed to defence, really, when we didn't have the ball, and that made a huge difference. Everyone bought into that. Some came along easier than others, but we got them there.
I'd imagine it's quite tough, because if you're going to the players and you're looking for them to come up with a plan, like that's what Bart would have told us when he was here, and in theory it sounds great, but I suppose the problem is if you've got 6 backs there and you ask them a question, what does tackling look like, or what does your marking your man look like, you're probably going to get 5 or 6 different answers, and then trying to bring that all together. And especially if you're stepping in if you have the players a couple of times a week in a training session, there's pressure on time all the time to do stuff, and you're trying to get through a lot of stuff. So if you get an answer back that maybe you weren't expecting, there's a lot of ways of, I'm sure it's quite hard to manage that and kind of bring everyone together. Is it? Or
I think if you've got the right intention going into the meeting and you're open to a better way than the one that you have, then you can ask the questions, because if you get something that you think, well, that's definitely not going to work, you can say to them, well, how would that work now if X did X? But you have to be way on top of your game here, because you have to be thinking, how can I, if the ropey answer comes, how can I actually bring the guy around to saying, no, that's not going to work, because at least he gets it out of his head, and at least I know that's what he's trying to do. So it's really healthy. But I don't want to kill him either. I don't want to knock his confidence, because you're trying to create an environment where people feel free to talk. Yeah. So you have to try and walk him around to that, and then kind of bring him over to something that maybe will work. And that does take time. But it's a lot less time than let him go out with that in his head when everyone else is doing that and he's doing that, and you're wondering, why is he not playing well? Yeah. So it's well worth the time, but you have to be. It's so much easier to want to just tell them and say this and say that, but it just doesn't stick. In my experience of it, this was a much better way. Even though it seemed long-winded, it wasn't. It was a lot more efficient to do it that way.
Like when you would have maybe in the past possibly told them what to do, I'm sure you would have. Like, you wouldn't get questions back, would you just get nods and yes and kind of agreement?
The biggest mistake I used to make was, does everyone understand that? Yeah. Because once you give them a chance for a yes-no answer, you're just going to get yes, and it becomes the yes-no game show, and you're just wasting your time. So I even in work, like all around that time, I started to try and pull back from those closed questions and ask open questions all the time, because, I would say, rather than asking that question of, do you understand it, I'd say, what do you understand about that? And then they have to tell you what's in their head, because otherwise it's just a lottery what has actually gone in. It really is, in my experience of it anyway.
Did the players notice the change in approach like the following year?
I remember Stephen Cluxton saying to me, 3 months into the year, he says, did you get a lobotomy during the winter? Because I was asking questions all the time and I wasn't going around telling them what to do. And he was saying it's very much like the modern teaching methods, like what you're doing. He says, so he was very comfortable with it straight away. I would imagine they did notice it. I mean, he said it to me because he probably was one of the ones that would be, I suppose, confident enough to come up and say that to you. But yeah, I think they responded well to it.
And Bart spoke about different areas that you would have focused on, and one huge one seemed to be tackle count. Can you remember why you kind of focused on that? Did you think that was just a weakness the team had, or do you think all teams kind of need to have that as their core focus?
Well, every team is different, so I wouldn't say one size fits all. Like every team I have managed, it had different challenges, and you know, I suppose one thing I have learned over the years is that you got to look at the players that you have and say, well, what can they do? Like if that team was all 5'6" and 12 stone, there's no point in having them as a tackling team, you know. Whereas we had, most of them were over 6 foot and were 14 and a half, 15 stone. So we had a potential benefit by being bigger and stronger than others. So tackling is a great way to impose that strength on people. So that's why we went after that, really. And, you know, when we go back to 2009, we had 25 tackles in that game.
The one against Kerry?
Yeah, the one against Kerry we lost. 25 tackles. And I think Kerry had 80 something. So even though they beat us on the scoreboard, they also beat us on the tackle count. So it was something easy to go after once you started to get into defining it. And it helped to ground people and anchor them to say, right, so I don't have to score 5 points. I don't have to, you know, win every ball. But if I can get my tackle count up and then move it on to getting turnovers over tackling, so we're really getting impact on it, then we have something really tangible to go after, and then you could build the other bits on top of that.
And did you get much friction on that? Because I know, I imagine if I'm a forward and I'm going to put the ball over the bar and I'm getting measured on tackle count, could that be a hard thing to kind of drill into? Well, not drill into the player's head, but kind of get that message across? Did it take a bit of time for people to?
No,
to kind of
I would say that nearly them all, because the defeats had been so bad in 08 and 09, they were open to doing anything.
Okay,
so they were all bought into it. One fella was probably a little bit wishy-washy about it, and he was probably our best scoring forward, which was Bernard Brogan. But he came around. It was tough love there, but by the end of what we did with Bernard, and it was just being really clear with him what was required, he was phenomenal. Like his tackling for about 4 or 5 years there, I'd say every back hated marking him, because when they got the ball, it was even worse than if he got the ball, because he was just so athletic and he was so quick with his hands. He was a fantastic tackler. So he did take a little bit of convincing at the start, but it was only a little bit. He got there in time. Okay,
yeah, it's good management. So yeah. Another just example I might bring up, because Paul Flynn was actually on the podcast. He spoke about this, and it's just kind of Bernard took my memory on this. Paul mentioned how when you came in charge, you reached out to him and said like what you were trying to do, and he was the type of player you were trying to bring in. But he also mentioned then that like early on in his Dublin career, he had to realise that he couldn't kick the ball well enough for an inter-county forward. And he said he used to spend time, I think it was in DCU, with yourself and Bernard, basically coaching him how to kick the ball properly. Like for me, if as a fan, that kind of sounds like a lot of effort for a manager to have to go through to pick a player who maybe can't, a forward that maybe can't kick a ball properly, to have to go and coach him how to kick a ball, rather than would you not go after someone who can kick the ball really well and then try and ingrain maybe a work ethic into him? What was the logic of picking the likes of a Paul Flynn, who wouldn't have had maybe the natural talent at the beginning of kicking the ball, to coach that, rather than picking the good footballer, if you know what I mean? Like obviously you've been proved incredibly right for what you did, because Paul's gone on to have an amazing career with 4 All-Stars back to back. But there was obviously something there you seen in him that thought this was worth it.
I think, you know, Paul and, for instance, Michael Dara would be quite similar in let's say when they started, they may not have been the best kickers of the ball, but the two of them had incredible physical attributes naturally. They were naturally strong, fast, you know, could run forever, the two of them, and they were so powerful. So, I mean, that's grand, except what they both had as well was an absolute total hunger to learn and get better, and they had a phenomenal attitude and belief in themselves, and that's harder to coach. So I definitely think when we were bringing people in from 2010 onwards, we were looking for that kind of attitude, belief and hunger to learn, and if they were big and strong, even better, because it's easier to teach the skills to a level that's good enough, but that thing there is kind of the intangible one that I have to say now I would struggle. I don't even know where I'd start when and I've had players who are extremely gifted, but just don't want it. And if they don't want it, I just don't know how you put that into them. Like the two of them, just their absolute, I mean, they just want to beat everything that they're thrown at them. So if you put them in a beep test, they want to keep going until it stops. And they don't stop until they get to the stage that it stops.
Yeah.
And when you have that, then when they put them out in the pitch, they're going to give you 110%. So it's people like them, it's far easier to spend time coaching that, because the other one, for I don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Because if the inner drive is not there, or the inner motivation, then it's very difficult. As I say, I have had players from kids onwards who were extremely talented but just didn't really want it. You kind of just have to say, right, if you don't want it, you don't want it. Like, I don't know. You probably can do it. I'm sure there is people who can do it, but it's not something that I have the ability to do.
Okay. And how would that look like? Because obviously, as this is going on with Dublin, you're managing in your career as well. Like you're at a high level of leadership in the businesses that you're involved in as well. Did your approach in business change as well with all the stuff you were learning with Bart?
Very much so. I was doing the same thing, because you're the same person, so you can't all of a sudden go, I've been a manager of football teams that way, and I've been a manager of business that way, because first of all, you get confused in your own head. So I definitely started to adapt it, and I was doing the same thing then, and I still do the same thing. What I do with a football team is what I do in business. I can't split my head to do it any way different.
What's the raw attributes in business that you'd look for?
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the attitude. If the attitude and the humility is there, and someone wants to grow, certainly for senior leadership positions, I find them to be the best, and the easiest to work with. They mightn't be the most talented, but they're much easier to gel as part of a team than somebody who's maybe very, very talented but really wants to be lazy, or has a different path. I'm not knocking them people at all, but that's their way. I find them hard to work with in a team. That's all.
No, that's a good point. Bring it back to the Dublin team then. So, like, when you brought the likes of all these players in who you said had that work ethic and that hunger, and you were chasing down the tackle count, then how did that progress? Because obviously 2010 we came quite close. Like, Cork just kind of pipped us in the semi-final. You could obviously see the progressions there in the space of the first year already. But how did anything change from 2010 to 2011, or was it still that focus of the tackle count and bringing those sort of guys in?
Like in 2010, the learning curve caught us, and a very, very good Cork team. They were a really, really good team, and I think if we hadn't have been around, they would have gone on in 11 and 12 probably to do more than they did, because they got caught in 11, I know, by Kerry. But they were a really, really good team, hugely strong, athletic, and a very good manager. So I think we learned a lot from them, and we tried to really work on our kicking game and getting the ball forward as quickly as we could, given the forwards we had. We took a view like getting it in there fast, given the players we had, was going to hopefully beat blanket defences. And I think the quarterfinal in 11 against Tyrone was where we really perfected that, where they just couldn't get back quick enough because we were kicking the ball over.
Yeah.
The full back line were able to kick it to our midfielders. We were able to kick it to the half forwards who kicked it in. And Dermot Connolly gave an exhibition that night. So, if he wasn't as good as he was that night, it probably wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
So you had to have magicians like him to finish off, a way of playing that was kind of high risk. Like, to be kicking the ball all the time on a wet night against a team as good as Tyrone was risky, but we had worked so hard on it that I think that was the big difference from the previous year. And, I think we had really, Dermot had brought his game to a new level, so had Bernard. Even the likes of Owen O'Gara was coming in, Kevin McMenamin. We just had more about us in 11. And I think also the belief within the group was after 10 was, well, there's only one place we can go now, and that's win it. And so I think from the off in 2011, there was a confidence that we were going to do, go certainly one step more than the previous year. And I think we doubled down on the work. They got stronger. They were very young, all those like Paul and that. So another year of development meant they were a very formidable outfit by 2011.
And how did the tackle count progress over time? Did you keep measuring it across?
Well, we did, yeah. So, I mean, there's just the stark contrast was 2009 against Kerry, 25. All Ireland final 2011, 125.
Yeah, there's a difference.
And I think in the last 10 minutes, I can't remember this exactly, but in the last 10 minutes, I think our tackle count was 10 and Kerry's was 2. Because we were younger, they were an older team, and they were starting to flag, but they still pinned us to the collar. Like, I mean, they very nearly won that game. I mean, we won by a point.
But it was the last 10 minutes that really swung it, though. Like,
it was. I mean, when the goal went in, I mean, if we were probably a little bit again further on in our development, we probably would have rammed home the advantage a bit more and not conceded the scores we did. But look, we were greenhorns. This was the first time in 15 years or 16 years where Dublin were in a final, never mind winning it. But then everything fell into place. There is a bit of luck that comes to this. I mean, the fact that the free is awarded in exactly the spot that would be Stephen's sweet spot for kicking a free.
Yeah.
That's luck. And sometimes you have to, in sport, there's an element of luck. And sometimes you lose because the other team got the element of luck. And then you have to take your perspective and go, okay, right, but we still need to get better because you have to try and overcome the luck. And eventually, I think with Jim, with the team, he got them to the point where luck wasn't playing a part in anything, because they got so dominant. Because that's ultimately where you need to go. But when you're winning a game by a point, there is an element of luck when you go back on it, refereeing decisions, whatever. It's but you take them when you get them.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, well, they're earned as well to an extent. There's a lot of work goes in to get that point where that free lands in that position. To be in that position, to be fair. In 2013, did the approach change at all? But obviously, you're going in as 2012 going in as champions. Then after, does it feel a bit different with a target on your back or?
No, I really enjoyed 2012. I mean, it was for personal reasons and. Because of his wife's illness, Mickey couldn't be there. So that was difficult for me because he was so reliant on him. But Niall Moyna stepped into the breach and did a phenomenal job. I mean, they were absolutely in even better condition than the year before. And look, I completely would say it was something that I learned a lot from that year because I hadn't got my eye on Mayo at all. And they were coming up along the rails if you were watching. And they caught us by surprise in the semi-final. My eye was on Donegal because I thought Donegal were phenomenal the previous year, but we never got the chance to play them because we got beaten by Mayo. But our second half performance against Mayo, we were 10 down at half time and it was looking dodgy. Like we got them back to a point and we had a goal chance that didn't go in. Again, that goes back to the luck. But what they did in the second half, I said to myself, these are really going to be unbelievably good going forward. But I mean, I needed for work reasons to pack it in. And I had done it, I had kind of had me fill of it. And I was ready to go.
What sort of hours would you have been putting in on a weekly basis?
29 hours a week.
Yeah,
like that's at the peak of it. Just on top of that's sort of coming into the Ireland. You wouldn't be doing that, early part of the season. But if you truly totted up all the phone calls and all of the things that you have to do, you're probably not far off that anyway.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like it's a huge commitment.
It is
on board. Yeah,
it is. But anyway, it is very enjoyable and it's a wonderful thing to have done. Would I want to do it again? Probably not. But it is a very it's a great honour to be asked to manage our county. So, I mean, the people who make the sacrifices are your wife and kids because they see very little of you. Now you get a nice holiday at the end when you win. If you don't win, they don't really get a whole pile from it. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, and particularly my wife. I mean, she's doing all the drops to training and to this and to that. And it's only when you're not doing it and you're doing that yourself you realise, ooh. She carried a big load.
Yeah, big time, yeah. And it's an important thing to say because it's great when we have these conversations. It's great whether you're talking to someone about their career or their hobby or their sport, whatever they do, there's always people in the background that are helping out and covering. And particularly when you're young kids like yourself, it's a big thing that's
like if Carsberg did wives, I definitely got the wife because she literally has helped and, she's also, would give you a pointer. She'd say things to you. I think that fella's not doing this or not doing that. Now, not that she was big into the football, but she'd just be listening to the attitude and she'd be very perceptive. So she was always, but then she'd always be great to get me away from it and we might go away for a weekend or go away for a night or, go for dinner and we wouldn't talk about football, which was great. She was very good that way and obviously she was a brilliant mother to the kids. So you always had that comfort that you didn't have to worry about that there was any problem there because she was always looking after them.
When you step back to focus on work then, and you've seen the success that they went on to have, how did you feel looking at that? Because obviously a lot of the lads who have these 5 and 6 All Irelands are guys that you would have brought into the panel. What was the feeling like kind of being out of the Oh, sure, looking at it.
I was delighted because I didn't have to do any of the effort and you get all the enjoyment. You know what I mean? Because
You're a fan
and you
again,
felt you had a little part of it because you were, you know, you had brought some of them in. But I mean, going to the matches and you can have a few points and sit back, and when it's getting squeaky bum time, you're going, well, sure, if they lose, they lose, and if they win, happy days. We go out for a few points after. So it was great to watch. It was great. I was in London for 4 of the years actually, from 12 to 16 with work, and the family moved over for 2 of those years. So we watched some of the matches in London, but sure, we thoroughly enjoyed it. Like,
then you took a step into hurling for a year. What was that like in comparison to football? Because I'd imagine, like tactics wise, hurling, I'd imagine just because the speed of the game, it's a harder game to probably employ tactics on. Like, yes, I'm sure there's certain things you can do, but compared to football, there's probably less control you can have in a game. Is that fair to say?
It is. I think. I think it's a more dynamic game, and there's more, you know, physical challenges and collisions in it. So you really have to. I think when you're doing a hurling team, and I've had our club hurlers for the last 2 years as well. And what I try to do, rightly or wrongly, and I haven't won anything with it yet.
You came close this year, to be fair.
We did well. But what we tried to do is really try and get them that they can win the 50-50s, they can win the rucks, and that they can move the ball quickly, short and long. And outside of that, like, yeah, you can do a bit of shapes up front and you can do a bit of this, but really and truly, if your team can't win the ball in the 50-50s, you're not going to win the games. And that's what, against Nafina, for instance, this year, we won most of them. We probably, again, a little bit of learning curve again for the team, that we just didn't have enough to finish it that day. But they're a great side. I mean, they could go on and win the All Ireland, so it was great for us. But even with the Dublin team, we gave Kilkenny, Wexford and Galway, well, we drew with Galway and we got beaten by a point by Kilkenny. But we physically confronted them and were able to match them because we had a lot of big, strong guys, you know, the likes of Liam Rush, Colin Keeney. Like, these guys were well able to mix it. Yeah. Danny Sutcliffe. And, you know, again, I think maybe if you look at what Matty did, he kept along the similar vein, and like they had a good run at it. But I think it's something that Dublin, you know, I think the physical thing is a big part of hurling. And so is the mental side of it, you know, because you can't be thinking too much about tactics there, because that game is happening so fast. You have to be playing off the cuff. I mean, you just don't get time. I mean, a guy can get you from about 3 or 4 yards from you, you know what I mean? So you just don't get a minute. So it really has to be, you have to have done all your thinking and preparing before you get out in the pitch. And it's a great game to manage and watch, because you really can't do a whole pile on the sideline, but it's great to watch. I thoroughly enjoy it.
It can't beat a good hurling game, to be fair. Like, with the morale that you took over and the confidence of the team, like, how was it in comparison? Like, I know, like, to be fair, the Dublin footballers weren't probably in the best of states when you took over them as well. Like, is that something you're conscious of when you come in? Are you trying to get an idea? Because, you know, you don't say football. You see, Man United changed their manager there recently. You walk in your first day and the dressing room is sitting in front of you, and you can kind of gauge the dressing room straight away. You don't really get that luxury when you're taking over an inter-county team, do you? Because it's kind of, you get to pick your, you take over kind of in the off season, and you get to kind of pick who's going to come in. You're kind of choosing your dressing room. Like, do you get a sense or a vibe of where players are at confidence wise?
Look, when we came into it, you know, I think club hurling had gone through a funny phase for a couple of years, and teams weren't that strong at that time. And then Coola came out of the blue, and that helped lift confidence. Like, that was wonderful. But I think there was a lot of negativity around between players of the 13 vintage and the newer players, and I don't know whether it was deliberate or what it was, but there was a bad vibe between them, between the age groups. And I suppose, I don't even know, did we really go to try and address that? We just really said, right, the past is the past and move forward, because they'd had 2 difficult years. They had some great games under Ger Cunningham where they, you know, beat likes of Cork and stuff, but then they had awful games as well. But it was a transition, so it was a difficult time, and he'd probably done the heavy lifting in the transition by bringing in a load of young lads like the likes of Donald Burke, and all of them had come in. So when we came in, it was a matter of trying to gel that and maybe entice a few of the older ones back for a year or two to give it just a bit of stability. But it was an enjoyable year. But there's a very different, the footballers we're going down a certain path in terms of even within clubs. Hurling guys, there is a bigger focus on the skill rather than the body side of things, and there's nothing wrong with that, except I think the body side of things, you're going to be even better at the skill if your body is even better. So it was hard. We were trying to do so many things. We didn't do as much on the body as we might have liked to have done, but we did what we could do, and it definitely stabilised them a bit anyway, and they went on, I think, well under Matty then.
It was just work that took over then that made you...
Yeah, I was working that year. We won contracts, and I was working in Africa and in America, so it just wasn't not practical. It just was not practical. Yeah.
That's a lot to take on board.
Yeah.
And more recently, you came back into the role of Mayor Ishke with Dublin. I'm just going to go on a limb and say it probably wasn't just to do with your water delivering skills. Are you able to chat about that at all?
Well, okay, hydration is very important, Andrew. It's very, very important. And I have to say, my first day on the sideline with the water, because I'd been up in the box for the previous games. I was around we were down in Kilkenny, and the linesman came up to me and said, the water guy's supposed to have water. Fair enough. Look, myself and Desi are good friends, and he asked me to give him a hand that year on just a few areas that he wanted a little bit of help. And as it emerged during the year, then we sort of pointed out that maybe one side of the pitch it might be handy, because we'd be in sync about what was required, that I could potentially be a person that can get some messages to players, because the runner was stopped, which is a real shame. Like that makes it very difficult to manage. So did it work? It probably helped a little bit. I suppose some of this, what I was doing was really just working with individual players. I didn't do a whole pile on the field. Would have chatted with him, chatted with the selectors. So it was a nice, easy role, to be honest, and picking up a little bit of, I suppose, troubleshooting when there be certain issues. But it was very easy to work with him because, as I say, we're friends and from when we played with Dublin.
A long history together. Just cool. There was something very special about it, just seeing it. I think everyone really enjoyed it. You enjoy every All Ireland, but there was something particularly special about that one a couple of years ago.
It was.
To see everyone together.
It was very enjoyable, yeah.
Were you may practice would you have to go down training and practice your water throwing skills?
Yeah, we used to, we get down a little bit before training, and we get out our little tray, and then we'd practice the throw. And I was brutal at it anyway, so... Anyway, I didn't get sacked.
Didn't clock any players with the throwing bottles on their heads, no.
No.
No, thanks for that. I appreciate just the insight there, because again, it was just something that it was good. As I said, a lot of people have requested you on the podcast.
Sure.
That was the number one question. It's like, how did you end up as the water boy? Just to bring it back a tiny bit, it's great to get an insight into everything there, Pat. But if we can just bring this back into maybe business, because a lot of Dublin fans and football fans listen to this, but a lot of them will be involved in some form of leadership roles in work. And a lot of stuff we spoke about there, like tax account and all these metrics that you follow, make perfect sense. But to try and bring it back into the corporate world and to be a good leader in business, what do you find works well? Like the metrics that you measure and try and give feedback and positive attention to, or like, is criticism part of it, or is that something that you try to stay away from? Or what do you find that even you're honing your skills as a leader in business over the last few years in particular?
So I would say, as a constant learning journey, right? Because I've worked in very different businesses, and I'm in another new business now for the last 2 years, which is Breedon. What we do, concrete and roads and all of that, right? So I've had to learn a new business. Is
it actual construction, or are you providing the materials?
We provide the materials, but we also lay the road. We actually construct the roads, but we provide concrete, and then we do a few other bits and pieces. But like, we're a mini CRH is the best way to describe us. We're a smaller version. And I've had to learn that. And then I have a new team. I had a brand new team 2 years ago that had worked together for 20 odd years. So that has been very interesting. I think there's a few golden rules that I try to use. And I think any leader has to find his own way, and you'll find your own thing that works and get your own rhythm. But one thing I found is, if I praise in public and appraise in private, it works well for me.
Okay.
Like criticising people in front of others, sometimes it has to happen because something's going a certain way, but it's not the ideal scenario. I think if you want to introduce a culture into a company, whatever it is, I don't believe in the fanfare and say, here, we're going to become high performance culture by doing the following, and you do big training course and razzmatazz. That, to me, I've been in companies where they tried that and it sort of works a bit, but I think if you as the leader have a way of doing it, I think people need to feel the change first, feel the difference. So me coming in fresh to this company, that meant they were going to get something new anyway. So the way I ran meetings, the way I interacted with them, they were seeing something that was maybe different to the previous guy, and then they were attracted to doing that, and then maybe you give them a little bit of training on what you're doing. But I really do feel that people need to feel it before they'll want to do it. Because if they feel the difference and they like it, then they might try and do it themselves. I think the big palaver of we've got this training course going to solve all your problems. I don't buy it myself. I've seen them. I've been on them. And, people who will tell you you're red, green, blue, yellow. I'm going, yeah, why? But like, what's that do? Do you know what I mean? Like, grand. That's my personality. But like, what am I going to do? Am I going to be treated differently? So I struggle with some of those things. And I think, if you get into a really high performing culture, you have to be very disciplined then. If you say it's okay to make mistakes and we're going to learn from them, well then, one, you can't chew the head off someone when they make a mistake. And two, when they do make a mistake, you have to put the effort in to do the learning and then share the learning. So you can't just say the words, you actually have to do the do. And that takes discipline and that takes effort. And you in my mind, you have to become quite structured around all of that type of thing. So, for instance, at every meeting I would have, at the end of the meeting, I'll ask people what worked well in the meeting and what could be better. So that I'm getting a feel for the meeting. What did they like at this meeting and what did they not like? And so all the time then those meetings should be getting better and better and better and probably shorter and shorter and shorter. So again, I think you have to have a framework in your head of the way you want your job as the leader, if it's a managing director job, is you're trying to conduct an orchestra. You can't get into the detail of everything, but you have to get into enough detail that you understand what their challenges are. But then you have to have a framework for constantly moving along. And then you have to be about 5 steps ahead to figure out, well, what's next? Because when these are done, I need to, make their cup a bit higher, the bar a bit higher for them so that they've something else to strive for. So I suppose as I've got older, I think maybe I've got a little bit better at that. I used to sometimes be doing that, but I'd be so far ahead of them, I'd come back and say, right, I'm after winning this contract. And they go, so we don't know how to do that. So I think trying to be ahead, but bring the team with you is very important. And I think, when people talk about culture and high performance, that all comes from the interactions you have. So it's how you communicate amongst yourselves, how you communicate and celebrate success. It's how you deal with mistakes. So for me then, when you come to metrics, you need to be simple what you're measuring, and it needs to be stuff. I'm a firm believer that you should really focus on the leading indicators, the things that you do to make the lagging indicators better.
Okay.
So for instance, you could focus on 0 safety accidents or 0 incidents. That's an outcome. Whereas I would say, well, actually, if everybody does their audits every month, if everybody does this, if everybody does the inductions, they're the things I like to measure. I'm going to keep the score as well. Yeah. But the ones that we can really affect are control, here. Yeah. So if you can get your leading indicators, and if you're measuring too many, they get lost. So if across a business, you kind of can have a scorecard that in each area you have 2 or 3 things, and they can change. And after a year, when you know one of them is now the norm, put in something else. But that is something that you have to feel and then work with the teams to see what is really important. And people love seeing the score. They really do. And then if the lagging one starts to get better, then they get encouraged to do more and more of that one.
No, that's a great point, and I appreciate that, because I said, like, what you're talking about there, if in my head, you picture Pat, the manager, in the change room at halftime, giving the halftime team talk. It's very easy to understand that context, because I think sport in general is just an easier example because the outcome is much easier to measure. It's right in front of you. Whereas in business, it's a tricky question to ask you, because it's very heavily dependent on the business and the type of work they do. But just to kind of get an idea, because we hear these words, high performance culture, all these buzzwords, man management, everything else. So it's just great to get your idea of it. Just a final question, Pat, because this has been brilliant. Really, really enjoyed this, and everyone listening will take massive value from it. Can you see yourself maybe getting back involved in the GA? Have you anything on the radar going forward? Because I know, like, we seen obviously the statement out a couple of weeks ago with the Croke Park board, like, and it's funny because I know you mentioned it was a clear statement, so like you don't need to repeat yourself. It was very clear what you mentioned, but like you say there about the hours you're putting in as a manager, like you start thinking about all the work that went in there. Like, can you see yourself in the future maybe getting back involved, or you kind of is that chapter done and you're focused on business now?
Well, I suppose I had a lot of health issues this year. I had high cholesterol and I was way overweight. And I started focusing on myself to get myself right, because I'm saying I'm not going to anybody if I'm, going to be sick. So I've put a good bit of effort into that, and I really am stepping away from full-time involvement as managing team, because you're very dependent then, and you're not as flexible to maybe do the things that you need to do, even from a health perspective. Like I need to get blood tests regularly now to just keep this thing right. But having put that focus back on myself, and I do like having my time back to myself just for a while. I will help people, not 100%, but the idea at the moment of doing something where you're responsible for a team or a group, that lives in your head, and I just don't want that at the moment. And it'll be nice not to be doing it, certainly for a year, and we'll see what happens after that. Certainly I will be keeping myself busy, because I do keep myself busy, but maybe busy exploring other things and thinking about other things. And certainly this area around high performance, I'm fascinated by the mind and everything around that. So I'll read up and I'll visit people and I'll just try and learn what's the latest, because I think the key to life, what I've really started to come around, I suppose, when you get sick and you have very high cholesterol and you kind of go, ooh, I am 53, you're heading into what they call sniper's alley, so here, cop onto yourself. But you start to think, and I think the most important thing to me now, I don't need achievements or success, or they're grand, and I'm glad I have them, but that's not really what I want to be. Is happy, really. That's the main thing, right? And so if that's, the scores on the doors are happiness for me. So that means going for a walk or a hike or whatever, and going up. Like, I've just for years have been saying no. People say, would you come down to such and such for New Year? No, because we've trained. Yeah. So we're going to Westport this New Year. Like, if I was doing a team, I wouldn't be doing it, because I'd be training them. So it's just nice just to get that bit of time, and then take it from there. I'll figure out what's after that.
Look, I think it's well deserved. It's a well deserved break, and I hope begrudge you of it. Thank you so much for your time, Pat. And I think I speak for all the listeners when I say that we'd love to see that list that you did all those years ago, but I won't ask you for the names. Thanks, Pat.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure, Andrew. Thanks.